How you doing, alright?
Hello.
Far away.
Could you?
Generally, the format here is when I don't have a specific thing to say, then this man tends to prompt with questions, and I try and respond and see where we go.
Mr. Speaker, could you elaborate on the congressional hearings that say they've discovered aliens?
Yeah, we know all about aliens at Speaker's Corner. We've had them for a long time. We're regularly visited by them. We regularly discuss with them, and we communicate with all sorts, through all the different mediums here. We communicate with the gods, and probably the gods are aliens. So there's nothing new about that. I didn't find the commentary from the guy very interesting though. Where are the aliens? Can't tell you. Where are the remnants? Can't tell you. Where are the samples? Can't tell you. But otherwise, he's very convincing because he's a naval something or other. So he's very believable. Just shows how mad the world is that people even go along with such a nonsensical claptrap, in my opinion. But I'm sure there are people who turn around. There are people who turn around to me and they'll say, "Speaker's Corner is a bit of a madhouse," and you get a lot of. Well, I'm loath to use the word conspiracy theory because I'm now known as a conspiracy theorist. But you do get a lot of people who come out with stuff like that. Sort of the wild end of the spectrum, and they'll say stuff like, if you say, "Oh, I don't believe that they've encountered aliens," then they'll say, "Whoa, you're working on behalf of the aliens," or something like that. You know what I mean? So, so I have to be a bit wary about that. But it doesn't mean I don't think aliens exist. I don't know, but I don't think that there's any. If there was any evidence, I think we'd probably know about it. And I don't think there has been presented any evidence. It's like the Yeti. I looked up about the Yeti the other day, just because there's some 10-part series on BBC about Yetis, radio series, and then I looked up pictures of the Yetis, hoping there might be something a bit better than the ones they've always had. This blurry thing in the background somewhere next to a piece of ice, but they've not. They just got like a picture of you somewhere like next to a hill in the dark, like with that, and the same. What's Bigfoot? Same thing. So I'm skeptical about that. I must admit. Yeah, I must admit.
Is AI?
Go on.
Is AI a force for good or bad?
AI is just a tool, isn't it? But in my opinion, when ChatGPT first came out, I started using it to try and check things out, check out how it responds to questions, remarks, statements, and factual material. I've done a lot of research about the COVID vaccines, and then I asked it about COVID vaccines, and it came back with false information. And I cross-questioned it multiple times, and only after about 30 minutes of cross-questioning did it come out with some factual responses. So it had spent half an hour arguing the toss with me, and then it would say, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, I'm a such and such, and I can't present this, but," and then you have to present the question another way. So it's like talking with a snake. Once you're trying to find out proper information, it's like talking with a snake. Constantly wriggles around the subject matter, tries to feed back the same information. But what is it doing? It's feeding back information from the internet, not really, as far as I can see, with full access to all the academic databases. So it doesn't seem to draw on the detailed academic references that you might be able to as a university student, for example, and it will pull together stuff that is incorrect. So, for example, give me one example. We're saying very specific ideas. Oh yeah. So I've got these newspapers written by Karl Marx, and there are copies of the articles online, and I've got a website where I can sell them, but I need to put a summary of what's in the article. So I thought I could save myself a lot of time if this ChatGPT is what they crack it up to be. I just give them the reference for the website, the web page with this 3,000 word article on, and I ask it to summarize the article. So I did that. I said, "Can you summarize this article?" "Sure, I can summarize this article." Bang, knocks out a summary. I said, "Can you summarize the article?" Because I thought, I'm really onto it here. I can save myself loads of time with this. I might make a few amendments, but otherwise it's... And then so it's a 3,000 word article. It's got the reference from the website. The website's been around for a long time, like 20 years. And it's a web page even. It's not just a website, it's a web page. So I give it the specific reference to the specific document with the specific article, ask it to summarize, and I said, can you add one paragraph, one poignant paragraph from the article? So it knocks out this thing. I said 300 words long plus a little paragraph, one paragraph. So it did it, and I thought, I'm really onto something here. So I started doing about 20 of them, and then I went back to the article. Not one of them was a summary of the article I requested. Not one of them had a quotation which actually was from the article cited. Nor were the quotations actual quotations. So that's hardly a reliable tool to be used for humanity's benefit. Now that doesn't mean it couldn't one day maybe do that, but you would think that ingrained into the whole thing would be such a simple task, and it couldn't do that. So I'm very skeptical about I haven't used it. I did for about, I don't remember I was talking about it when it first came out. I tried it out, and since that time I've not used it at all. And I do a lot of writing, I do a lot of reading, and I'm not using that stuff at all, because you don't know.
How did it pass exams?
And then not only that, then I cross-question it on those articles. And I said, how can you have given me this when it isn't in the article, this quotation? I said, can you give me a sentence from the article? Of course I can give you a sentence from the article. Bang! And then I check, I copy it, paste it, the sentence isn't in the article. And I said, can you give me 4 words in a row from the article? I couldn't do it. So I'm not trusting anything like that. Any child of 5 can do what I asked them to do, at least in terms of finding 4 words connected together. But ChatGPT could not. So therefore I'm extremely skeptical about the capabilities, about relying upon any of those capabilities to do anything of any use.
Why did it pass exams? Why does a university go to ban it?
Jordan Peterson went on, I saw him make some comment online, and he said, oh, ChatGPT is now going to expand so much, it's going to draw on the whole of the internet. And I asked it a question, because he's got something called 12 rules for life, like, you know, clean your room and stuff like that. And then which I probably need to follow that one. It's one thing I'm not very good at, but nevertheless, so I submit to his authority on this important question. But there you are. It stopped raining. Flybonite. You're a flybonite.
Global boiling.
Huh?
Global boiling.
Are we coming on to that in a little while? In a little while we're coming on to that. Well, it is. You can't have boiling with lots of liquid. And there's lots of liquid around. Now it just needs to boil. Right? So we're halfway there. So where was I? Can't remember where I was.
Artificial intelligence, how rubbish it is. It can't put 4 words together.
You're pleased with yourself, are you? Oh yeah, Jordan Peterson. So then he said, so I asked it to write a 13th rule for life. And then he said, I was really impressed at how it turned up with a 13th rule I hadn't thought of. Well, to be honest with you, you asked me the question, you know, how can it answer exams? And Jordan Peterson is saying, it's so clever, it can make a 13th rule, which probably means his rules are probably pretty shit, not sophisticated, which probably means the exams, which they were exams in business, business administration. Business administration, you know, it's one of these things where it's a very formal task. You know, to give you examples, you know, of like supply and demand or planning of a company, this type of thing. There are formalistic structures to this. And so perhaps you can ask it to do something very formal and it will come up with an answer that is satisfactory to an exam board or to, you know, Jordan Peterson to make a 13th rule. But I don't think comes up with anything serious in relation to any new ideas, any synthesis of old ideas, accurate synthesis of old ideas, other than very formulaic things. And even then I wouldn't rely upon it. I mean, imagine, if you can't ask it to summarize, no, I don't want it. If you can't ask it to summarize, to find 4 words in an article out of 3,000 that are consecutive, then I don't see how a doctor can rely upon it to assess your health. And by the way, this is an important issue because there are AI companies now working on cancer research, and they're offering people to diagnose your condition, whether you've got cancer or not, for a payment of about £200-300. So there are people now in fear going onto the internet, ordering a test for cancer, getting told they've got cancer by AI when they haven't got cancer at all, and taking treatments for cancer deemed appropriate by AI. And so that tells you exactly where the stupidity can go to. Now, even if it was 75% accurate and detected cancers in people who had cancer and didn't know it, for them to make 25% error, which is what they said in the Financial Times article I saw about this, illustrates how dangerous this is. It's a sort of lunacy. You know, they talk about AI drugs now. So they get some sample of the RNA of a person from their swab from the nose. They put it inside a multiplex test, deem what bacterial and viral material they might find, and a PCR cycle, say, of 45, in which case they can find a wide variety of things, which they can identify on the basis of past identified viruses or bacteria, the RNA of them, and say you're infected, and then try and treat you for an infection when there's nothing wrong with you. And we've had this over the last few years with you know what, you know. So there's nothing to do about this. Now, on the subject of global boiling, because Antonio Guterres, United Nations top knob, declared this week that the world has entered a phase of global boiling. And who can disagree with the United Nations? After all, they're very clever people. They're eminent, clever, and whenever they make a statement, it makes world news. For some reason this week, you know, it's unfortunate for the BBC and for the Guardian and for the Financial Times and the Independent. They've all this week been publishing stories, one day after another, claiming that the world is boiling, on fire, way over the tipping point, about to be destroyed, hotter than ever before in 120,000 years, intolerable heat. Man is about to be eradicated because of this enormous heat wave affecting the planet. Rhodes in Greece, there are pictures on television, I saw them myself. Rhodes is on fire. You know, they had people leaving hotels in Rhodes because of fire. Imagine. So I looked on the internet, you know, sometimes it's a useful tool. I looked on the internet, I did a search, and I put in date parameters. So I thought, okay, when's the news been ubiquitous, like general news outlets, when have they covered stuff? So I put the year 1999 to the year 2022, and I put Rhodes fire. What a bing, 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 bing. Up it comes. 2008, 2014, 2022, 2020, 2018, 2004, Rhodes on fire. People evacuated, people fleeing.
They haven't sorted the Google.
Something is wrong in
They
Rhodes.
haven't sorted out the suppression.
Right? Rhodes doesn't have proper fire services dealing with fires. Then, you may have seen the news this week,
Yeah, the night, wouldn't you?
I'd heard Piers say this stuff before,
It's
and
arson
I
as
thought
well.
it was mad. And he said there are arsonists
Yes.
setting fire to places
That's what the fire
in
brigade is
Italy
saying.
and in Greece.
Fire
The
brigade.
Greek Minister for Climate said that 66% of the fires in Greece are arson. Arson. So, and why? Because some people, apparently, if you set the land on fire, you can buy it cheaply. Apparently that's one of the reasons why they're doing this. The other was they were saying, well, that some of it supposedly wasn't arson, some of it was negligence. But negligence, again, it's about forest management. So any forest, the forests we have in Europe, almost without exception, are not primeval forests. They've been cut down, right? at least once.
Secondary forest.
But often, many times they're cut down. Right? And if you go to the woods, I remember when I was a kid, I used to go and stay in the Black Forest in Germany. And then sometimes we'd arrive there, because I was a little kid and I'd sort of forest, you know, and then sometimes we'd arrive there and an entire side of a hill had been cut down. And I was thinking, oh my God, they're destroying nature, right? But actually all they're doing is clearing away, allowing the regrowth from below. And what happens is trees, the stuff falls down from them. And as that accumulates over a year, 2 years, 3 years, unless you clear it away, it's a tinderbox. It can be set on fire by lightning, it can be set on fire by someone drops a glass on the floor, a bottle on the floor, the sun shines on it, and it concentrates the light, starts a fire. Same, even with a tin can, in theory, could do that if the right shine on it. So, and then of course people do, you know, fire, campfire, whatever else, smoke a cigarette, chuck it down. So unless you clear the undergrowth in many forests, you'll get a forest fire. And in some places like Australia, throughout its history, Australia has had bushfires, large bushfires. Australia gets bushfires as a natural process of regrowth. The plants and animals know how to survive, or better said, have an instinct, or have a background, if not knowledge, but an automatic method. And it's a prerequisite for the development of the bush in Australia. And in Greece, I looked up on the internet research on fires in Greece. And there they were talking about the lack of the fire service, the lack of forestry management, and so on and so forth. That's the background to the fires in Greece. That doesn't mean it wasn't a hot day. Yes, of course it's a hot day. There is no time anywhere in the world where the same temperature will be at the same place at the same time. And then they posted this week this madness. Was it last week? I can't remember. One story. The point is, why are the stories being published? They say, a scientist said. A scientists say. And then they quote 3 of them. And then you check the names of these scientists, and they're in some lobby group connected with the green corporate movement. And so then you ask yourself, well, they're always going on about peer review. Have you read a peer-reviewed study? Have you done a peer-reviewed study? Have you checked the peer-reviewed studies? I often have. But then I say, but then if you look at what they're publishing and telling you is evidence of the connection between man-made climate change and the fires, there's no evidence behind it. It's just statement by a scientist on the day, on the hoof, and they quote them. They even had, last week, they even had someone, they had a quote from someone in Rome, and they said, a man who runs a newsagent stall said it's never been this hot before. That was in the bloody news, on the BBC. Then they had, in America, they had a story in England as well, all around the world, the same story. They had these great big fat members of staff of a visiting centre in Death Valley in California. Now Death Valley, there's a reason it's got the name.
Pretty hot place.
It's a reason. It's the hottest place on earth. And it's in a valley. I think it's 100, 200 meters deep or something like that. And it gets very hot there. And then they had these guys standing in front of the measurement, like the temperature measurement, Fahrenheit and centigrade. And they were standing in front of the hottest for whatever years. And then inside the article itself, at the very end on the BBC website, it said, oh no, actually they had a video interview. And the wardens of this visiting centre, they said, actually the temperatures are about 4 or 5 degrees lower than what they show on here, because this is encased in metal. And that they show. And then I looked on the other reports of the same people, the same interviews with the same people, they'd cut that bit out. They'd cut it out. Now I ask you, because I've got lots of people who believe the story that man is responsible for all of this. And for God's sake, I used to believe it myself, because I just, well, it seemed to me a progressive issue, you know. So
because we care.
Because we care, of course. How can you not care? You know, what about the younger generation? They're all going to frazzle. You know, we didn't care. If only you sit down and go on strike and refuse to go to school anymore. then you can change the world. You know, so that was the story they said. So because of that, how can you not, you know, after all, that innocent girl looking after all of us with autism, you know, surely we should be listening to her. You know, so on the one side they say, the science says this, peer review says this, science says that. And on the other side they say, listen to the girl who's got no science, hasn't even finished school. You know, listen to her, she knows what's happening to the world. Right? So, sorry? Well, right, okay. But I mean, nothing against the girl, you know what I mean? I don't have anything against her. But it's farcical that on the one side they say science is behind this, but then they rely upon wafer-thin, threadbare nonsense to trick you into the story. The Euless story in London. The Euless story. Sorry?
It's lies. It's bad. It's not. It's
well, it's propaganda from a
yes.
particular side.
Yes.
Now, the Euless story. I had people last couple of days. People arguing me on the internet about Euless. Euless is they say certain cars emit too much emissions, and they must be fined for driving around London. They've got cameras on every corner watching the people now. They are facial recognition capable cameras, and they're watching every car in London in order to find those cars that are supposedly breaking the emissions rules. Why do they need to film every car in London? In order to check up on a tiny minority who are supposedly going to be breaking these rules. And then, of course, the Tories won the election in Uxbridge because Labour had introduced this Euless charge. Some people said, oh no, but what about our children? They're going to die of asthma. Look up on the internet. Air pollution, London Underground. There you will find, from The Guardian, from the Financial Times, from research from Oxford University, that between this station here, Marble Arch, and Notting Hill Gate, if you get on the underground there, the particulates in the air below the size necessary to enter deep into the cells in your lung and injure and kill you over the long term, those particulates are something like 18 times higher than those allowed by the World Health Organization. And the Mayor of London is responsible for the tube. So if 5 or 10 million people, 5 million people a day are using the tubes, and every week that adds up to 30 to 35 million people using the tube every single week, twice a week, often on journeys of 1 hour or 2 hours a week to go to work, it tells you that the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, that champion of clean air, is a liar, because he is not fighting for clean air. In fact, he's fighting to get people out of their cars where the air is cleaner and into the tube where the air is poison. And anybody gets on the tube in London. I remember when I used to come Waterloo Station when I was a kid. You get out of Waterloo Station, you go down, my mum used to work in Piccadilly, go down to the Bakerloo line, and there's a stench like someone's had a shit in the corner. Every single time you enter that tube station to get on that line. It's still the same today. And it's 150 years of accumulated guns, accumulated human bodies. Effectively, you're breathing in cannibalistically, and also accumulated metals from the rails, shaking up and down and being forced through the tube tunnel. Not only that, but the British intelligence agencies, how kind they are to the British people, in the Northern Line in the 1960s, they used to release anthrax into the Northern Line to test the dispersion rate of anthrax in case of a biological weapons attack. So they used to test it out on the people in London. Biological weapons in London, carried out by Porton Down, the British, what do you call it? What are they called anyway? The Scientific Service for Bacteriological and Biological Weapons in Salisbury. They tested all this out on the people in London. And so the idea that they are out to protect our health by stopping some cars from driving on the road is palpably nonsense. So that's why I'm opposed to it. I mean, I don't mind having less dirty cars on the street, fine, good. But someone correctly put this thing. They had this big article, Euless, you know, why we need Euless, why we need clean cars on the road. Oh, look at the pollution. And then the comment section underneath this Financial Times article, there were people going, my God, we need to do something about this. Look at the fires in roads, all the sort of stuff. Knee jerk, you know, someone prods you with an electric shock thing to make you say something, you know. It's like Pavlov's dog, you know, bad air, roads, you know. You come out with the stuff automatically. That's what they want. That's what people are doing, you know. And then someone out of the blue posted, you know, it was something like fires in roads, climate change, all that. And then someone posted on there, better go and buy a £44,000 Tesla then, you know. Quite appropriate, you know what I mean? And then someone, what do you mean? What are you saying by saying that, you know? Well, that's how mad it is. You're supposed to, like you said earlier on, go to the Congo, kill a load of kids,
yes.
extract cobalt out the earth,
yes.
Kill a load of kids out there, transport it around the world, scrap the existing car, which you can fit with a catalytic converter for £100. £100 cut 90% of emissions, and they can do that in all the cars in London if they want. And then they're supposed to scrap those cars, so get rid of existing labour and buy new ones at £40,000-50,000, extracting enormous resources from the earth, doing the so-called emissions that they say they're going to stop.
They're an environmental
And of course,
disaster.
by 2030, when they stop the electric car, when they stop diesel and petrol cars from being sold, everyone will have out-of-date electric cars, and then they'll say, oh, we need to remove those electric cars.
Yeah.
They'll have to be replaced as well. You think the Tesla car from today is going to be in the road in 2020, in 2035? They're going to ban them. Below our emissions, dangerous batteries. That's what they'll say then. And then all the cobalt they extracted on children's blood from Congo will all have been lost, wasted, and they'll dump them under the earth as well. This week they've got disasters. They had a cargo ship this week. I think it was 300 electric vehicles. 30 of them blew up, you know, and the staff on the ship had to jump overboard. One was killed. 30 of them jumped overboard because the place was exploding. I don't know. You're looking up cargo ship electric cars. You'll find it there. Only last week. They reported it once and then it began to disappear. You know. That's the kind of crap they want to feed you with, you know. Feed you with shit and expect to come out with shit. Of course, some people do. They feed them shit and they come out with shit. Some people. You're welcome. Nice to meet you. Yeah. What are you doing out in the rain? Come out here in the rain. The speaker's got you in that case. In that case.
Everything you said, but what about man-made impact? You don't think there's anything?
I don't think it's that significant. I think man-made impact on pollution is massive.
Yes.
Man-made impact on climate,
yes.
I don't think. And even if it was true, there's nothing we can do about it. Nothing. I mean, what I would say, like, firstly, I've always wondered, you know, what man's impact on, for example, like the First World War, the Second World War, the war in Ukraine, the war in Iraq, what impact does that have on emissions around the world? I think that's probably a lot, and I've never seen a study on that.
No,
you know, what was the impact of all the nuclear bombs they set off in the Bikini Islands? What was the impact on that on global, like, atmospheric pollution, sea pollution? What was the impact of all the munitions they're blowing up? Billions and billions of munitions being blown up in a corner of Ukraine now. I mean, I remember when Chernobyl, like one single nuclear plant broke down, that there was this rain came over England. I remember I was organising a strike, a school strike at the time. I was a young man. I was organising a school strike at the time, a student, a school strike at the time, and this funny rain landed over Wales. It was in Wales, we were organising a strike, and I remember, what was that about? It just felt odd. And then they said, oh, Chernobyl, there's been a nuclear plant has blown up, and, like, you know, there's a war going on in Ukraine, and, you know, I don't know what's being dropped into the air. They're talking about uranium-tipped missiles, about cluster bombs, about all the other munitions they're blowing up. They're much more sophisticated than 1914, 1918, 1945, You know, these bombs are going off one after another every single day. I don't know if that's affecting the world today. Maybe it is, you know. But that's a field of scientific investigation. But no one's interested in doing such scientific investigation because the war in Ukraine is a moral war for justice. That's what we're told. We're fighting for freedom. And therefore, if it pollutes the air, who gives a fuck? You know, no one really gives a fuck about that. That's the truth of the matter. So that's why I'd be reluctant to say how any of these things are changing the air. I don't believe the evidence I've been presented with.